coaches at all levels consistently identify parents as the primary issue. So we'll talk about that and how can for coaches to ask parents, but I would like to see how we can sort of give parents these questions so that they can ask before they assault or complain.
Welcome to Game Changers, Athlete Edition. I'm Courtney Harmon, a former Division I softball pitcher turned high-performance business coach who knows what it takes to translate athletic mindset into real-world success.
And I'm Julie Jones, a Hall of Famer and former Division I head coach with more than 20 years of experience turned mental performance coach. Together, we bridge the gap between elite athletics and lifelong achievement, helping you unlock your full potential on and off the field. This podcast is your go-to source for inspiration, motivation, amazing guests, and actionable insights to help you elevate your game.
Thank you so much for listening to Game Changers podcast. This week, we're continuing the conversation with JP Nerbun about culture with parents and how they affect that with their athletes. Listen in as we continue.
I think we can go to the parents because, and to tie it all in, the biggest complaint, according to JP's book, the biggest complaint between parents and coaches is communication, right? Is this that, and I just, one of my teams, we won the championship last year. This year it was horrible, not a good year at all. And of course the evaluations were bad. And now it all comes down to the coach's communication. And the coach's communication probably didn't change that much, but it becomes more apparent when things aren't going the way that people want them to go. Right.
So you're saying the parents are saying the coach didn't communicate with them? Is that what you're saying?
Everyone is saying the coach didn't communicate with them. I mean, like everyone. So, because all of a sudden he can't coach. Last year he wins a championship, he's won 800 games, but this year, no, can't coach. So, same thing happened to Kyler last year. She was, calling me crying because she got crushed and they were at the NCAA tournament, but that's a whole nother story. So let me get my other notepad here. Yes. But so just to start, Courtney, just so you know, one of the lines in the book is coaches at all levels consistently identify parents as the primary issue. So we'll talk about that and how can, and JP has some great questions. I sent them to you and I sent them to JP as well, but he has some great questions for coaches to ask parents, but I would like to see how we can sort of give parents these questions so that they can ask before they assault or complain, right? So just trying to help coaches from the other side, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many coaches listen to this, but I know parents do.
Yeah.
If we
and
can
I don't think parents realize the impact they have on the culture,
right.
Just from the aspect of even if it's chatting at the kitchen table at dinner about something, it's twisted and it's put in a lens for the student's brain. And that student then has that, JP, you said entitlement or whatever their mentality is. And they go to practice and it changes everything. Like it is like a snowball reoccurring. So JP, start us off. I would start your perspective and how parents affect culture through their athletes' lens.
Yeah. I mean, I think the end of the day, the adults in a group, in a team, like the kids watch their example regardless of the age, so and it's probably watches it in a different way when they're younger, but how do you respond to referees, to how do you handle when we lose, to how do you handle when we win, how do you handle when I don't get to play, and that parents' reaction and response to that starts to create a narrative and certain beliefs that then that individual carries. You could say, hey, you need to do this. You got to keep working hard when you don't get selected. To your child, you could tell them that, hey, put your head down and work hard. But did you still have a really strong reaction and strong disappointment? And that all comes back to your own belief system, So, I could talk to you about good parenting behaviors, but rather it's just like good parenting beliefs, like beliefs that my value and self-worth as a parent has nothing to do with my kid's performance on a soccer field or a football field or a basketball court, right? Like it's really, really easy for us to lose sight of that as parents, though. So really, what do you believe about sports? What do you believe about why you want your kid to play sports? And when they perform well, what do you believe about yourself? When they don't perform well, what do you believe about yourself? Right? Those are some pretty important questions because parents have a huge impact here.
So I've read the book, The Sport Parent Solution. I've coached for decades, and I'm also a parent. And now I'm coaching my son's 13, 14U baseball team. And I coach third base because familiar area for me. And he is up to bat with runners in scoring position, and we're losing. And of course, he doesn't swing. And automatically, when he gets out, I clap my hands and probably hang my head. And I know better. But it's if it wasn't him, I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would have said, okay, all right. But even for me, and I know better, we still do connect ourselves so tightly to our kids' performance. And it has not, I've had my career. I had a fine career. I have, need no more, but still it pulls us. And that does affect culture. It affects our child. And I immediately went over and said, buddy, next time, I gave him a little bit of advice. I can't remember what I said, but I wanted to look him in the eye and say, it's not a big deal, right? Mom's an idiot is basically really what it is. I mean, mom needs to chill, right? And she knows better. But, the biggest thing, right, that coaches fear is parents anymore. And I'm hoping that you can share with us how we can help coaches or how we can be more aware, because we know that how we think turns into how we feel and how we feel turns into how we behave. How do we shift our thinking, or what do we do when we get to that point where we're almost ready to do that and we know better? Like, how can we help ourselves from getting so pulled into this when it does not matter in the big scheme of things?
Yeah, let's start with, before we start talking about how parents can help coaches, let's talk about maybe how parents can help themselves.
Absolutely.
I think the big thing is awareness of what you're feeling in some of those moments. Like you had awareness even in that moment. Oh, I just did something that's not really in alignment with my values.
Right.
So go back to, why do you want your kid to play sports? Develop confidence, belief, all these good things, right? We all want our kids to play sports for good reasons. And then I remember distinctly myself, something I talk about in the book, which is my daughter played a game and her first big performance, she's 6, right? But she scored a bunch of goals, and how much I was jacked. I was so stoked that she played well. And we get in the car after this game, and I'm like, oh, incredible. Where would that come out of today? You're so into it. And all she could be like, Dad, are we going to still get ice cream?
Yeah.
She just didn't care. She just did not care. And I cared so much more than she cared. That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And in that moment there, I was like, ooh, okay, I see where this goes. What I see, because I've been in the sporting landscape for so often, is that parents that can be really high are the ones that can go really low.
Yeah.
And that becomes a warning bell as a coach. If a parent would be like, oh, coach, you're awesome, love everything you're doing, I'm going, yeah, we'll see when we lose how you feel about that. We'll see when your son or your daughter doesn't play, we'll see how you feel about that, right? They get really high, they can go really, really low. And so it's for us as parents to try to be a little bit more even keel about hey, we see what this sport could do from a growth, development, social, physical, mental, emotional for our kids. And we also recognize it's just a game.
Right.
It's just a game. It's the end of the day, if our kids don't want to play or they don't play well, it's not the end of the world. And this is, it's constantly, there's so many polarities operating within this as a parent, because like with, I have that perspective, right? It's just a game. I also have this perspective that this can teach my kid a lot about life lessons. And I got a 7-year-old, almost 8-year-old son who plays football. And he came out of a game 2 weeks ago, and I was watching him and I was raging, not because he was playing poorly, it's because he wasn't playing hard. And now I know he loves the sport. Right? I know he loves it, and I know he knows how to play hard. If he didn't love the sport and I was just trying to encourage him, it might be a little bit different. But I know he can play hard. I know he loves the sport. And so I just asked him, what, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your effort today? He goes, 5. I was like, really? I was like, how do you feel about giving a 5 out of 10? He goes, not great. I was like, okay. So then he had another match there the other day, and it's an optional match to play up with the under 9s, and he's playing under 8s. And I said, there's an under 9s match. You're invited to go. He goes, oh, I'd like to go. I said, well, what type of effort are you going to give? Because we're not going to go through this effort to get you there if you're not going to give great effort, right? Like, you don't have to play well. That's totally fine. But you like this, you want to go play it, then you're going to give good effort. So when and that's a so difficult balance. It's like tight roping where I'm, policing or coaching them on their effort and stuff like that. But there is a bit of that. So it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray area in there. But so I'm constantly navigating myself. But there's a lot of polarities. This isn't an easy job as a parent, but it all just comes back to, well, why do I want my kid to be playing this sport? And why do I want him to give great effort in that moment? Not because I care if he scores 5 goals or if he helps the team win, because in our family, we give great effort in what we do, right? So it comes back to my values. So I would just say values-based parenting and all this is the way to go.
You sound so much like Katie Scott, who plays for the KC Current. One of my favorite little soccer players. She's 17 years old, was in our soccer club that I work with here, and then played a year at Penn State, went on directly to the pros. And she has tattooed on her arm, make a difference, in her dad's handwriting, because that's every day. That's what he told her, just make a difference. And if she made a difference, they didn't care what she did. Of course, now she's she's on the U.S. team. She's a pro soccer player, but it was all about effort and connection, not about performance. And it is really difficult. And I have had to keep myself from learning. My son swims, and he's relatively, he's got a little bit of a talent for it, but I've kept myself from learning about it, quite frankly, to avoid having any, sort of inkling to try to coach him. So the cool part is I go to a meet, I watch it. I hear other people, crazy, talking about who's on the relays and who's not on the relays. I really don't care. And we get in the car and I say, did you have fun? And I can say that without, baseball has been a little bit different because I have a little bit of knowledge, but I feel better about that for sure. When he sits down and I'm like, did you have fun? Yeah. And it's such a different experience for both of us, I'm sure, in that time.
And I that's definitely a question I ask. I come back to that. Hey, did you have fun today? But I like to go to other questions too. It's probably one of my 5. Like I like to go to some sort of reflection. How was your effort today? We go to that one. But I also like to get them, and this kind of ties into the culture thing. One of the best ways that I can do is obviously by modeling my behavior on the sideline, that I'm not acting like a jerk as a parent and raising them to be good people and have good character. All right, that's a great given. But I like to go to questions for my kids, and I encourage other parents to do this, which are getting them to think about others. Right? We want to have a selfless team. So I'll ask them, hey, who else played really well today on the team?
Yes.
I'll get them thinking about that. I was like, hey, who on your team was struggling out there that could have really, used some encouragement, you think, the next practice? But I really love it. And so now my son, he came off the other day and he was talking about how, this player he's actually getting a lot better. And that's something I talk a lot about as I, just the side conversations. My wife will go, how'd the match go? Oh, I might talk about my son's effort, but I also might talk about, so-and-so was really getting better. So through osmosis, they pick that up. And, or I just even praised one other kid on the team who was actually encouraging on the field. He's like, well done, Kieran, to my son, Kieran, I was like, it's really, I noticed Zach really was really encouraging you and a few others, just pointing those types of things out. So trying to highlight those great team behaviors, trying to encourage through questions, reflective on other people. What could you do to help coach? I mean, since we started at 3, 4 years of age and some little small little Saturday things, they don't leave the field until they thank the coach. Like that's a given now. Like it's just, they go to every coach, they thank the coach. That's just, if you get in the car and you haven't said thank you to coach, you got to get back out of the car and go find the coach, you know?
Aw.
Like that's a given now. So now it's like, hey, well, what can you do to help coach out? You know, before training, after training, you know, at matches, what can you do to help your teammates out? Like these are the type of questions we're asking them before games and stuff now.
We had a kid that played for us at Akron. Her name was Alex Helfrich, and she was a very, very good player. And I would give her advice or whatever, you know, help with instruction. And every single time she looked at me and she said, "Thanks, coach." And I would smile and I would like, "You are welcome." We call her LA, you know, I mean, because she was so quiet, but I would make like a big deal of it because I thought that was such an odd, it's funny because it was odd because it doesn't happen, but it was such a touching, I'll never forget it. Right. She made me feel like I was helping her, and why that's what people want to help. So every opportunity I had to give her some feedback, I was like, running over there, like, because LA is going to say, "Thanks, coach." Right. And I love that. I love that. What can you do to help your coaches? Who else played well?
Yeah.
Who else needs encouragement? It's observing the landscape. It's getting off of you or out of you and into somebody else. And those things, I mean, I love these. I'm going to have this in my car.
I wrote notes down too. I'm like, okay, I need a little bit of, we do a lot of like, how'd you do well today? What could you work on? How was your effort? Like, but those are all self-centered. And I mean, we know better. So I love that. We do that as a team as I coach for my daughter's 8 or 10U team. But to change the aspect of our home to get them thinking differently, I love that.
And one thing too, and I still ask the question, "Hey, did you have fun today?"
Yeah.
But the answer doesn't need to be yes.
Right.
And I think this is something that probably, especially as they get up there in their ages, is like, there's going to be hard days.
Yeah.
Like in Ireland here, you're practicing in February and, you know, it's cold, it's rainy, it's dark. It's just so cold. It cuts you to the bone and you're out there and you're in the mud. It isn't a lot of fun. Right. So, hey, that's okay. It was miserable out there today. You know, like, okay, you know, those are days. Was it worth it? You know, did you get better? Did you push yourself? Did you challenge yourself? Right. Like, obviously you want to try to get kids to have fun in those environments, but like, I do think in the sporting culture, parents, athletes, coaches, if it's like the positive sporting environment, we want this positive team culture and this positive environment. You know, I would say there's a lot of positive in hard. There's a lot of positive in struggle and in challenges. And so I remember I was coaching my daughter and son's team. They had like a mixed team. My daughter's 9, my son's 7. So mixed under 10s community games, little football match that we played here. And we got absolutely hammered. And it was most of our sports here are non-competitive. Like they don't keep score until like 11 or 12. But this was competitive as a knockout tournament. And I loved that. I loved that we have a bit of a mix because I think it was great to have a competitive environment. The energy was higher. Parents were, everybody was excited. But gosh, I couldn't do that every weekend. But here in this environment, the kids get absolutely crushed. And I pull them all in. And I was like, all right, we lost by a lot. How's that feel? Not great. I mean, kids are crying and everything. And I'm like, yeah, it stinks to lose, doesn't it? Right? But what was good here today? What do we have fun still doing it? Right? You know, it's just like, and that's why we work hard at things. And there's just so much to learn. Like, yeah, we don't need to have a super big smile. We can go home and feel sorry for ourselves for a little bit. You know, that's sports. That's part of the experience. You know, it doesn't mean that you all being a part of this, little tournament was not worth it.
Right. Right. We learn more often when we fail than when we don't evaluate when we win all that often. We just move on and say, "Oh, that's how it was. That's what we wanted. That's how it was supposed to be." I heard an Olympic coach.
As parents, like the parents will just be like, "Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You played so hard. You played really well." It's like, no, actually, we didn't play really well. We played really poorly, and the other team was better. And those were two things I said. Hey, we didn't play well. We didn't get enough trains and I learned some stuff. We could have done this. Their team was better than us. Like they're just better than us, but that's okay. They're just better than us right now. We're going to get better. We can go do more things out there and that's okay. It doesn't need to be all like, we want to not let them feel a little bit of that pain. And it's just like being with them in that pain of a loss is so important.
You said something there that's so important. And this is why I work with certain kids on the mental game, is because they finally come up against kids who are better than them. And they think it's coaching. They're not getting something from somebody else. We don't talk enough about the fact that sometimes people are better than you. And that is something that I think it's vital for us as parents to be able to admit that and help kids understand that that is life.
Coaches don't communicate that directly enough too. I think coaches actually fail to say, well, listen, he or she is playing over you because they're better than you.
Right.
I had a call with multiple athletes and different coaching calls that are dealing with, selection and stuff like that in the last month with some of the teams that I support. And oftentimes, they're frustrated, they're not playing. And I say, well, tell me, why you should play. And the amount of times that players give me really waffle through that answer, I'm like, if you don't know why you shouldn't play or why you should play, then how do you expect your coach to know why? Like, you should be really clear about what you do better than other people. And I said, and if you can't come up with that answer, maybe you aren't better than the other people. And that's okay. It just means you got awareness, right? So a lot of times, I'm the best out there. Like, just one player is like, I can do really special things when I have the ball. I'm like, that doesn't really mean a lot. I don't really know what that means, and neither do you.
Yeah.
You got to be really clear about how are you better than other players out there? How are you going to help the team win more than other players out there? And if you can't, that's okay. You just got to recognize that.
Right. And then you know where to work.
Yeah.
And then we put our effort there.
What a great opportunity for parents to help start getting their athletes to think that way versus it's okay. You didn't get your time or today wasn't your day. But to have that realistic, honest conversation, JP, Julie and I have talked about this before, like in the idea of, I think my coaching style is a lot different than everyone else's, especially at 10U. You've been the elite of the elite. You've been where you need to be, but taking it down to, if you like, I was a coach before I was a parent. So unfortunately, my daughter probably gets more of the brunt of things, not the favoritism. There's no daddy ball or mommy ball. But it's really the idea of, I look at this team holistically to be like, if you want to know what you need to do better with, come and ask me. But I think I really treat that differently as a parent versus a coach. I can think of our team holistically. Here's how you need to move. Here's what you need to do differently. Here's what you've done great at. But I think I can do that. And I know Julie has done that for years before she had children. And it's really the idea that we really excel in that manner because we've been in the trenches. We've coached long before anything. How do we help our students and our athletes deal with this maybe it's like, maybe we don't have any control. Maybe there is a tough situation. And maybe, let's face it, maybe they're in a harder team and it's not necessarily they're not better or maybe they are better. How do we help our athletes overcome that, to not be so selfish and like, it's not about you, it's the coach's fault, it's whatever. Because let's face it, there are teams that they're going to have a more difficult time in that maybe don't have the honest approach to coaching that they maybe could and should as a coach.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're asking in there is around like, how do we help our kids through really difficult team situations where the team culture is negative, where the leader is maybe negative.
Yes.
And I think the great question in this is, at what point, like a lot of times parents are like, well, should I take my kid off that team because it's not a good environment, right?
Yeah. And
when it becomes that varies based upon the child and the environment they're in. Like if you put a third grader in a certain environment, but then you put them into the same environment, but they're now in 10th grade. Obviously, they've hopefully developed more resilience and to be able to withstand some sort of stress, right? and that type of stimulus. So it's not traumatic, right? Like we can go through a million different examples. So, what becomes traumatic for a kid and what is not traumatic, we try to probably throw that word around a lot in parenting and too much, is to really recognize that, hey, can this build resilience or is this going to break my child? Right. Yeah. And I mean, I have coaches that have gotten accused of complaints against, accusations labeled against a coach for damaging their child's mental health and well-being because they didn't play them. Mm-hmm. And I would just say, if you feel that a coach has hurt your kid's mental health and well-being because they didn't play them in a game, I would say you have failed them as a parent. I would know that, because you have not prepared them to be able to deal with that difficult situation in life, or you have overemphasized the importance of playing, and that connects their value and their self-worth and identity. So I think one of the biggest things that we could do is on a front loading is just helping them to ground themselves that, this matters, this is important, this is significant, and you care about this, and maybe this sport is your dream, and you want to play college basketball someday. That's great. And yet this isn't going to be the only thing in life. There's other things that matter that are more than this. And so first off, it's just grounding the significance and what's most important about playing, being on the court, performing well, right? Grounding that. And then when the adversity comes, goes, all right, can we learn from this? Let's go back to why we want to play sports to begin. How can this help you to grow? How can this help you to become a better player, become a better person, and just looking for that opportunity for growth. So the first thing is framing it from the beginning that this isn't the end all be all. And the second thing is just everything's a learning opportunity. And a parent that's worried that their kid's coach is a bad leader, I mean, you don't have to look far to find a lot of bad leaders that we've had to work for or have to operate under within our society. So welcome to the world. Here we go. Great opportunity. How do you sort of go through a year with shitty leadership?
I love that. And that building resilience factor. We as parents often are like, well, let's just pull them out of that situation. Let's not just leave them there. And I love that, because that's an honest assessment, because you are not going to be able to protect them forever, and their job and their next journey. What is their next chapter? And you're right. There is crappy leadership all from start to finish in any journey that you're going to have. Build that resilience now and help them get through the mental aspect of it to be able to thrive in those situations.
I have a lot of opinions on best practices just through the nature of my work, obviously. And I've gotten the research and all this, right? And then I have to really remind myself, I have access to way more information than 99.9% of the coaches that will ever coach my kid. So I have to very quickly ground my expectations of what I have for a coach. And so when one of the coaches says to me today, oh, you should see what I did. I ran them so hard and I was doing this and this and this. I'm surprised they want to come back. And I'm going, oh God, why'd you do that? Why would you do that? That's so dumb. And I'm just like, that coach is just doing the best they can with what they know, right? They're in it for the right reasons. Sometimes they might lose sight of that, but either way, they're in it for the right reasons. And not everyone's going to be perfect. Not everyone's going to do it the way that I want to do it. I've been wrong about things before. And it's just recognizing there's other ways of doing it. It's not going to always be the way that we'd want it to be done.
I complained, not to my son, of course, but to my father about baseball practice for numerous years. Like, nobody knows how to run a baseball practice. Because nobody knows how to run a baseball practice. I did it for almost 30 years. I should be an expert. And so my job was then to go and help them learn how to run a baseball practice. Right. So, I mean, but instead of just, sitting on the sidelines, of course, I was still coaching at the beginning, so I could not, it was impossible to coach, but, we expect other people to work through our paradigm that they don't have. And that's not fair. That's just not fair. You mentioned, this is such an important topic, Courtney. I'm glad you brought this up about these tough situations and learning to deal with leadership. And there's so much team jumping. Because you don't play doesn't mean the coach is bad. Right? Because you don't play or because you didn't get what you wanted, or the coach didn't talk to you in exactly how you wanted, doesn't mean the coach is bad. But I feel that, and JP, I'd like your opinion on this. Let's talk a little bit about you mentioned the word traumatic, and there are certainly some situations that are traumatic. There is no question about it. But what is our role in helping frame what's going on the team in how we communicate to our child? How can we better help them? Like, instead of just yanking them out, what do we do in our stories, in our conversations, to help them be more resilient or change their perspective or withstand?
Yeah. Well, there definitely is not feed a narrative of the victim in these
Right.
situations, and vilify coaches. I mean, at the end of the day, coaches do the best they can with what they know. Typically, 99.9% of decisions they think are going to help them win a game.
Right.
So it's like, okay, how do you help the team win? How do you hurt the team's chances of winning? Maybe you'll start from a point of self-reflection on that if playing time is the issue. You may not agree with the rules. A lot of my kids grew up in a sporting system here in Ireland that's equal playing time up till under 12s, right? Which is great, right? Obviously, not everybody has that environment, right? So it's, when you choose a team or you choose an environment, make sure that it aligns with your values. Don't go sign them up for the top team that is very selective. And then when they don't get selected, don't get playing times. It's all about promotion and recruitment. And they're not on the field of the court, right? Like, just sometimes we set ourselves up for real frustration, disappointments, because we clearly could have done our homework on this coach or this environment or this league or this club. And then decided to not go into that because it doesn't align with our values, right? So if we care about development, go find development type teams, that could be one thing as well, is to be a little bit more proactive in that. When they're in it, helping them to reframe those experiences. I would say the big thing is, like you said, not making themselves out to be the victim in that, and helping them to find what is within their control, and recognize that not everything is within their control. Some things are just in their influence, and playing time is within their influence, not within their control. They don't control who plays and who doesn't. They don't control if the guy in front of them is better or better than them. And if a lot of times the guy in front of them, okay, what can you control? You can control how hard you work, your attitude, how you show up, helping them to focus on those things and working to improve. But this is the hardest thing I see. A lot of kids do work hard and they do push themselves, and they're still not getting minutes. And then parents are like, wow, they're doing all these things. It's like, yeah, but they still are other people. Or sometimes the player in front of them maybe isn't that working that hard, but they're still just way better. Yeah. And that's life a little bit, that just is life. And so it's just helping them to focus on what they can control, but recognize there's things that are not even a control or in their influence, getting them to shift to that. But I also think a lot of it can come just down to your own values as a family. For me, curiosity and gratitude, discipline and love are my 4 values. Okay. So I would look at it from that lens of, how do I bring my 4 values as a human and give these to my kids? Well, gratitude, how can you be so grateful for the coach and the job they're doing, even though they're not playing you? How can you get curious around what you can do, what you can do to get better? What are some things you could explore at your own available resources? Things like that, right? To love. How can you still love your teammates? How can you still care for other people around you? Those types of things. Those would be big things, So it's just, once again, focusing on your values, what's within your control.
Absolutely. You mentioned there's so much more. That one of the biggest fallacies, I think, that in the United States, at least, and maybe around the world, is that if you work hard, you'll get what you want. It's not true. It is flat out not true. If you work hard, you'll give yourself a chance to get what you want. You get a better chance of getting what you want. But those two things do not equal each other. And I think that's one way that we can help our athletes realize that. If you don't work, you will not get it. If you do work, you might get it. But it depends on what everybody else is doing, quite honestly. And you're right. So the associate head coach at Cleveland State, where they just cut the program, played for me at Akron. And as a freshman, it was hard. I don't think anybody ever left our program and said, "Coach, I wish you would have worked me harder." That word's never said. And she went home and was complaining to her mom, and her mom said, Erin, she said, Coach Jones is not laying in bed at night thinking of ways to make your life miserable, which I'm sure they found very hard to believe, but it's true. I mean, the things that coaches are doing most times, 99% of the time, are because they think it's going to help them win, or it's going to benefit the team in general, whatever it is. And coaches who put winning ahead, maybe don't do some of the things underneath here that need to be taken care of to make sure the communication and everybody's feeling whole. But most, at least professional coaches, know that when we work together, we are better. And I think that's something that we have to remind our kids all the time, is that they're doing their best. Nobody wants to lose, and no one wants to make you feel bad for the most part. I mean, maybe every now and again there's an outlier, but most coaches are in it because they're trying to help people. And that's really lost, I think, in today's culture.
Well, I mean, there are mistakes coaches make around the playing time. The one is that they actually don't pick the player that gives the team the best chance to win. They do make mistakes on that. And yet, like, that's just a hard thing to get right. Like, you pick this player, and this player might have been better. I mean, just looking at an NFL draft, an NBA draft, I mean, people are spending millions of dollars to pick the right player, and they pick the wrong player almost half the time, right? So, I mean, it's just like, no matter how hard you work at that, you, as a parent, as an athlete, even as a coach, you have to accept that you're not going to get it right all the time, but you're doing everything you can to get it right. But the bigger mistake that coaches make is they just don't communicate really well why they're making decisions, how they make decisions. They don't tell players in advance, as much as they probably could in advance. I used to walk in and just put the starting lineup on the board there, and it's like, well, I knew who was starting days before that. I could have given that athlete an opportunity to process that disappointment in an environment, outside of the game, right? Rather than just 2 minutes before the game. So I think that's where coaches could get a lot better. It's not to say that coaches aren't perfect in this, and yet I would just encourage parents to be like, the majority of coaches aren't good at that, though. They're just not good at communicating in a way that makes it easy for kids to process that disappointment. And rather than complaining about that, just accept that that's just probably the reality of most coaches, most teams, and it's been for many, many years. I don't think many coaches were really great communicators even 20, 40, 50 years ago around who was playing, who wasn't. It's just not the thing that they do well. I work with coaches to obviously communicate better, but the majority of them won't, do a good job of communicating that. And that's the same in the corporate environment, right? I work in corporate environments. My wife, is a leader within the world famous, Google and all that stuff. And there's a lot of bad communication, even in organizations like that they just, why did you get promoted, not to get promoted? It happens there too. So once again, difficult situation, preparing them for life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt about that.
You got anything else, Julie?
The last thing that I just want to hit on is in the Sport Parent Solution, which I think is a great read for parents, even if they're not a coach, because it's important to see things from the other perspective. But you have some questions that coaches can ask parents in the book. And, what's one measurable goal do you have the team? What do you want your kids, what do you want their experience to look like if they don't reach that goal? What do you want your experience to be like as a sports parent? Some of these things, talk a little bit about how these questions, and maybe we could share these. I don't know if we're willing, a couple of these in the show notes. That how can having parents have a list of questions that they maybe ask at the beginning of the seasons of themselves, how can that help them prepare so that they do stay on track?
It's funny as you read the questions that I wrote in a book. Gosh, this might be good for me and my wife to sit down and just reflect on those right now at the moment, because we're in a busy season of sports, and it's just because it's great to reflect on those every year because we so quickly lose sight of what's most important, and that for me, the answer is, well, why do I want my kids to play sports is for the social connection, the physical activity, the sense of improvement and working at something and working towards a goal, and just the joy of being out there and playing a sport. Like those are what's the really important thing. So it's important to reflect on those, to know those, so that informs how I make decisions here. So what do I want them to experience? What I want it to be like for me as a parent? Well, I don't want it to be me running around from thing to thing all the time. I want it to be about community and meeting other parents as well. And, so these questions are all just to help parents recognize and remember their why and their principles and what they value in the experience, so that they can try to lead their kids through that experience.
And I think what you said right there is that their why. And, one of the questions is, what can you do to help create that experience? We have to remember that we are a major influence on our kids' experience. And if we want our kid to have a great experience, a lot of it is due to our influence. So just a great reminder for all of us. And this has been so helpful. The book was very helpful as from a coaching perspective. And in fact, I'm going to use a couple of the questions in a session that I'm doing tomorrow with the team. But this is so important for us as parents, because no matter how much experience we have, we still get pulled by this culture, even though we know only 2% play Division I, or and then from that Division I, only 1 or 2% go on to play pro. This is not a lifelong career for people. This is an experience to help us grow. But this is so important for us, and this is great information for parents, from parents, and the fact that we know that we're not good at it.
The first step is admitting.
Yes.
In any good program.
That's right. Right. But we can do ourselves a favor by sort of following the 12-step program through a lot of things, if you think about it. Right. So,
absolutely.
Yes.
JP, thank you so much for joining us today. I will put both your books, or all of your books, links in the show notes. We'll also put your podcast in there. If there's anything else, Julie, that I missed, make sure I get that, and I'll add to the show notes. But I love that. So nice to meet you. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge from culture, leadership, from not only the athlete's perspective, but the parent's perspective, and what we can do to make our athletes the most successful through their career. So thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a really special conversation, different than just speaking to coaches. So I'm glad I got to share a little bit of my journey on this as well.
Final thing, JP, tell everybody where they can get in contact with you, or how they can follow you, other than what's in the show notes.
Yeah, you can go to my website, tocculture.com there. And, I've got various online courses for coaches, as well as you can reach out there if you're interested in me coming in to facilitate a workshop, whether it's for coaches or for sports parents. I do that quite often as well, too.
That's great.
I love that. Thanks so much for joining us on Game Changers Athlete Edition. Remember, champions aren't born. They're built through dedication, perseverance, and the right mindset. If you found value in today's episode, share it with a teammate, with a coach, or someone who could benefit from this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and follow us on social media for exclusive content and daily motivation. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and stay focused on becoming the game changer you're meant to be.